When the civil war erupted in Syria in 2011 after Bashar al-Assad's government used violence to repress nationwide pro-democracy protests, everyday Syrians were caught in the crossfire. The city of Aleppo, home to millions of people and millennia of cultural heritage, was destroyed by fighting, its civilians left without crucial resources and forced to flee. In total, nearly 14 million Syrians were displaced because of the civil war, according to the UN's refugee agency, most displaced within the country and about 6 million leaving the country altogether. A vast majority of those 6 million refugees live in Syria's neighboring countries, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey. Turkey itself has taken in over 3 million Syrian refugees, more than any other country. I've met with many of them in Jordan and Turkey. These are Syrian refugee children whom I met in Turkey in 2015. When those countries began limiting their asylum processes and when Assad began using chemical weapons of his own, Syrians turned to Europe. Then Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, made her rally cry, "Wir schaffen das," or "We can do this," as over 1 million Syrian refugees arrived in Europe between 2014 and 2016. Germany would take in the largest number of any European country. In what would be known as the 2015 European migrant crisis, the influx of Syrian refugees sparked a host of political consequences for the continent. It didn't help that around the same time, the Islamic State began ramping up terror attacks across Europe, fueling anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant sentiment. Much of the EU's political problems to this day stem from disagreements over migration. So when Bashar al-Assad's government fell earlier this month, the question on the minds of many was, will the Syrian refugees get to go home? Just a day after Assad was toppled, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Italy, Denmark, and Austria all announced that they had paused their asylum process for Syrians. Other European countries have followed suit. Austria's government offered a €1,000 bonus to Syrians who wish to return home, although this was only after they considered outright deporting them. Turkish politicians, mostly those in the opposition party, are offering to cover transport tickets and relocation costs for Syrian refugees to Turkey. The tone of those offers was described as discriminatory by some in the Turkish press. Many Syrians have shown an intention to return home, whatever may be left of it. In a June 2024 survey by the UN's refugee agency of Syrians living in Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq, 57% say they'd like to return to Syria one day, although many were unsure how soon that day would come. But a premature push of Syrians back to the country could make it harder for that nation to get back on track. Will Todman at the Center for Strategic and International Studies argues, quote, flooding Syrians back makes the odds of a successful transition in Syria even longer. If too many refugees return at once, it would increase pressure on strained public services, exacerbate social tensions, and undermine the already slim prospects of a successful transition. The consequences would not be limited to Syria, end quote. There are other obstacles, too, like the fact that the militia group now in charge of Syria is designated a terrorist group by the U.S. and other countries, which makes getting humanitarian aid to Syria complicated. There's also still a fragile situation across the Middle East. Israel has carried out hundreds of strikes on Syria since the fall of Assad. Israel said the strikes are aimed at destroying military infrastructure. Nonetheless, many Syrians who have been away for so long are excited by the prospect of rebuilding their country. Faisal al-Turki Najjar, a Syrian refugee in Lebanon, told the publication Middle East Eye as he packed his bags to return, quote, Syria needs people to rebuild it. It needs people in the army, the police force, security, healthcare, all sectors. If the good people do not come back, it will be taken over by thieves and those who want to exploit the situation, end quote. There's a lot to unpack here, and joining me to do this is David Miliband. He's the president and CEO of the International Rescue Committee. He's the former UK Foreign Secretary. He's the author of Rescue, Refugees and the Political Crises of Our Time. David, thanks for being with us. I really needed to talk to you to understand this because it's not binary. Right? On one hand, you want people to go back to their own country. I think most refugees pray one day to be able to go back to their own country. But this is really complicated. To start with, we're not sure what the country is right now in Syria. We're not sure how stable it is and whether this militant group that has taken over has the capacity to even run the country.
Well, good morning, Ali. You've summarized the situation very well. My organization, the International Rescue Committee, has been working in the rebel-held parts of Syria for the 13 years of the civil war. So we've got experience of working under the rule of a range of armed opposition groups in the northwest of the country, including the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group that is currently leading the formation of a new government. I think it's important to say that we never took Syria off our emergency watch list. Some people said the war's over, that's won. We never fell for that because there were 16 million people inside the country in humanitarian need, 7 million refugees, as you've explained, outside the country. I think the priorities now are, one, to respect the choices that Syrians themselves are making. Certainly deporting Syrians back to Syria wouldn't be quite wrong, but those who want to go back should be encouraged to do so for the reasons that you've explained. Secondly, it's vital that the humanitarian aid is able not just to cross borders, but to flow into the country without risk of getting caught up in the terrorist designation that you referred to. You may remember that when we spoke about the Afghan crisis and the fall of Kabul to the Taliban, we talked then about the importance of allowing humanitarian aid and humanitarian aid workers to do their work. That's critical. Thirdly, the health system of Syria needs to be sustained, because without health, people certainly won't go back. And then finally, just for openers, the economy is absolutely key. If there's hyperinflation, it's going to be really exacerbating what remains a very fragile political situation, both inside the country, the formation of a government after 50 years of the Assad family's rule, but also, you referred to the continuing military activity, there's still the continuing activity from Turkey into northeastern Syria. So the political situation, the geopolitical situation, is also extremely fragile.
One of the things that you have to think about, and when you look at the countries that are on your emergency watch list, what they share in common is difficulties in terms of governing capacity. And this is tricky, particularly in this case in Syria, where there's a terrorist designation. On one hand, that perhaps shouldn't dictate whether or not people are designated terrorists, but we have to figure out a way, and you and your organization and other organizations like yours have the ability to work in places where the government has less capacity or may not be the ideal government. That's sort of not your point. Your point is, how do we help people who are internally displaced and externally displaced?
Well, we're focused on the people, because if you don't support the needs of the people, you're brewing up a political disaster. And I think it's very important to say that our emergency watch list of 20 countries, the real common denominator is conflict. That is the big driver of extreme poverty. Poverty is going down in stable countries, but it's even when they're poor, but it's going up by about 80% in the last 20 years in countries that are caught up in conflict. And there are 59 so-called civil conflicts going on around the world at the moment. Syria is a prototype example of the modern direction of extreme poverty. It's been caught up in conflict. There's many outside powers. There are non-state armed groups. Our point is, as a humanitarian organization, always focus on the people. What are their needs? Because if they're not being met, you know people will flee and there'll be trouble.
And I don't want to leave without reminding people to check your emergency watch list out. You'll learn a lot from it. Sudan does remain the greatest humanitarian crisis at the moment that you're dealing with. David, thank you for your time. As always, David Miliband is the president and CEO of the International Rescue Committee, author of the book Rescue: Refugees and the Political Crisis of Our Time. And it is important to go to rescue.org and take a look at the emergency watch list to get a sense of how tough things are for folks around the world in this holiday season.